About a month back, I played Star Trek Armada 1 for the first time, and enjoyed myself quite a bit. It was simple fun, using a very basic RTS framework, throwing a Star Trek coat of paint on top, and then executing on a campy Trek story complete with Borg invasions and time travel. It was good, if not groundbreaking, and that is something I can appreciate. I'll be the first to tell you that I am terrible at RTSs, and you need to keep my perspective in mind here. Because it's this lens that allowed me, I think, to appreciate the refined simplicity of Armada 1 so much, and conversely found Armada 2 to be kind of a tougher sell. Why am I telling you this? Because Star Trek Armada 2 is absolutely a fine piece of consumer gaming software, maybe even a great one, whose biggest problem is the unfortunate juxtaposition of being a numbered sequel to a game that executed the same formula better. Well, I guess it depends on who you ask. There's a war between Star Trek Armada fans about which title is the superior experience. Maybe not so much a war as conflicting preferences largely owed to the fact that Armada 2 doesn't play it safe, which came as a surprise to me. For a next year follow-up to a licensed game that sticks the number 2 on the end of the title, this game has its own voice, with gameplay changes that go beyond just adding more stuff and instead add totally new dimensions to combat, including but not limited to, adding totally new dimensions to combat. Star Trek Armada 2's back-of-the-box feature, its elevator pitch, and what they will make sure you know about if you visit its 2-decade-old official website, is the fact that the game is in 3D now. Though Armada 1 had 3D models, that was only for vanity. The game itself played entirely on a 2D plane. Armada 2 takes full advantage of the fact that you are in space. Anytime you input a command, you have the ability to change the depth of that movement, allowing the ship to be above or below the origin. The strategic implications for such a change sound like they would be staggering, and maybe in an expert's hands they are, but I was shocked at how little this seemed to matter insofar as getting the credits to roll. Your height doesn't modify the combat outside of allowing different formations. It's really just an extension of your movement tools more than your combat ones. To me, this felt more like a saucy marketing gimmick than it did a meaningful gameplay inclusion. I think the real shift in how you play is actually a whole lot more subtle. Star Trek Armada 2 makes a series of minor decisions to make you feel like you're commanding an armada. In its predecessor, you didn't really need wide-sweeping armies, and most campaign missions could be tackled with a small strike force of under a dozen ships. That's changed in Armada 2. Maximum group size has increased from 8 to 16, and to balance that out, the average ship is now way less durable, so they die more often. Ships dying more often means they need to be produced more often, which pushes your economy and your micromanagement. Those ships need to be crewed, and crew generation is more active in this title. Planets must be colonized if you want these ships to be adequately staffed, which means add find hospitable planets and send in colony ships there to your list of tasks. All of this makes the game more APM heavy, there's more skill required, and more skill expression, which is probably why Armada 2 is good for the multiplayer enthusiast. But I'm here for the campaign. How did that fare? Oh no! The Borg have access to a superweapon that allows them to assimilate entire planets. They must be stopped at all costs. The premise is very similar to Armada 1, at least at first. The Borg do start as the big baddie, but the ultimate antagonist ends up being Species 8472, one of the 2 new races alongside the Cardassians, that are playable despite not getting their own campaign. Their scope is limited to bot matches or multiplayer, which definitely feels like a missed opportunity. Romulans lose their campaign too, leaving us with 3 faction campaigns for the Federation, Klingon, and Borg respectively. That's not to say there's less here though. Despite being diced up between less parties, there are overall more campaign missions, and they do feel meatier. You won't breeze through this one in 5 hours, which does lead to an increase in the amount of unique scenarios, but also makes the pacing of following the actual story a bit more diluted. This isn't as easy to consume in a weekend as an episode of Trek like Armada 1 was. But not every comparison to Armada 1 is unfavorable. In fact, in many ways, Armada 2 does make some objective improvements. Graphics are better, UI is better, you get this cool new warp speed option to transport your Armada faster, and despite the fact that there's more information required to be successful, the tutorial does a much better job at establishing a lot of those new mechanics. There's even enhanced AI options that allow you to give your units more autonomous control over themselves, freeing you up from the minutia so you can focus on the bigger picture. That's because Star Trek II is, in many ways, a refined sequel. It's just that it isn't content with being that alone, and instead puts its own spin on things. Maybe that's because it was kind of developed by a different studio who wanted to leave their mark instead of just meeting the bar. Maddmike Software is a development studio made by former Activision technical director Ian Lane Davis at the turn of the millennium. There's a lot of overlap in the credits because Maddmike did produce work on Armada 1 as well. It's just that it wasn't until the sequel that they took over development completely instead of playing backup for Activision, who only played a publishing role in Game 2. Maddmike stayed in the strategy game world for a few years thereafter, most famously developing the Empire Earth series, though nowadays they're just a Rockstar subsidiary because they successfully ported Bully to the Wii and 360. All things considered, Armada 2 isn't a bad freshman credit at all. The two conflicting ideals of trying new things and not fixing what isn't broken didn't find the perfect balance for me, but you can't accuse Armada 2 of being a low-effort update. Games don't necessarily follow a linear path of improvement with the more features they have added to them. I'm left to wonder how much more I would have enjoyed Armada 2 had I never played its predecessor, experiencing it without the subconscious expectations of what it should be as a sequel to a game that I preferred. Without a way to wipe Armada 1 from my brain, I'm left with the following conclusion. For me, Star Trek Armada 2's biggest issue is that it may be set in space, but it doesn't exist in a vacuum.